Awesome, we are now live. Excited. Ooh.
Fabulous. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Dialectic Society's Public Speaking Workshop. We do this almost every year since 2018, and this year we have an online iteration of the event. So first, I'm going to invite our president, Lenny, who will tell you a little bit about what the Dialectic Society is all about and what we do.
Hello, I'm Lenny. Dialectic Society, what on earth do we do? We do a lot of sort of celebrating, speaking and talking about things and discussing things. So we'll have sort of talks on politics and on social affairs and on everything we can possibly think of. And then we also do things like this. So we have 2 public speaking workshops planned for this year, and then the public speaking competition, which we're doing again this year. I had to cancel it last year because it came at like the very beginning of coronavirus and that didn't really work. But this year it's going to happen. Even though it happens online, it's going to happen. It's going to be good. So that's what we do. We also have lots of socials and fun things, and they're happening online, even though we can't do things in person. But yeah, that's who we are. That's what we do. But I'll give you back to Ananya because you don't really want to listen to me.
No, we love listening to you, Lenny. You're awesome. Cool. So without further ado, to the workshop. Our trainers are Julie, whose name means saddle maker in Hungarian. She is one of the Dialectic Society's amazing members and has represented the GU in several international debates tournaments and as well as in institutions within the UK. Thank you for doing this with us. Benedict is also our trainer this evening. His fun fact is that he grew up on an island 7 miles of the north coast of Northern Ireland, which is presumably why he is very good at projecting his voice. Benedict has also represented the GU in several debating competitions internationally and within the UK, and we're very glad to have him aboard. As you might realize from here, debating at the GU is many of our members do that. It's not compulsory. If it's something you like to do, you can join it. Yeah, off to Julie and Benedict.
Wow, thank you very much for a lovely introduction, and welcome everybody to our talk today on public speaking. It's brilliant to see so many of you here. We're going to do a couple of things today, but I think the best way to start off would be to ask a question which is probably quite useful to answer to work out what is the best way to public speak, and that would be, if we can have a beautiful first slide, that would be what makes a good public speaker. And we're going to break this down into useful chunks for you today, but it essentially boils down to 2 key avenues of skill, 2 characteristics, if you will. The first is the knowledge of what techniques are at your disposal as a speaker. What are the tools you can use to get your point across to the people who you're speaking to? And then secondly, it's the practicing and the understanding you gain from experience of how best to deploy those tools in order to serve your purposes, in order to get your point across to whoever you're speaking to. And today we're going to focus on the first of those, giving you a basis, giving you an understanding of what it is you can do, what it is you're able to do to deploy your skills, to give you a basis from which to expand with your own creativity and bring your own voice to any kind of speech which you are making. Yeah. Who can be a good public speaker? Is it you? I think it is, because absolutely anyone can be a public speaker. I think in our media and in our popular culture almost, there is a really, really unhelpful fixation that we have with building up people who are good public speakers as being the unimaginable gods who are born with some kind of innate talent, some kind of special ability that cannot be unlocked, and is just they're just born with, they're just empowered with from the moment they have set foot on the earth. And you can understand why people like to tell that story. People like to say, oh, it's these really special people who've done these amazing things with their lives, and they're bringing all of that with them whenever they speak. And it's certainly true that living an interesting life can give you some interesting things to say. But it's absolutely not necessary to be a good public speaker to have this kind of special story behind you. It's almost ironic that essentially what is being done in these cases when these stories are being told is those people who are writing those stories are using the kind of techniques which you can be taught in public speaking to make a story more compelling and more interesting. They're using those techniques on you to make the story of what it means to be a good public speaker even more interesting. We're going to strip that back, and we're going to teach you how to build those skills and how to invest in your own ability so that you can, through practice and through time, become one of those amazing public speakers who you've seen speak before. If you think about any of the iconic speeches of history, any of the speeches which spring to mind when you think who is a good speech maker, who is a good public speaker, that person probably has given dozens or possibly hundreds of speeches before in their lives before they got to that point. It is all about practice, all about finding your own voice and honing your skills to the point where you're able to confidently deliver whatever content is in front of you to whatever audience presents itself to you. So we're going to start you on that journey today by giving you those basic tools, those basic skills, which you can then take forward and you can then make something of. Anyone can do public speaking. So how does this work? Why do these techniques work? Why is this a skill worth practicing? Well, your listeners are human, and humans are nothing if not predictable. We are not great listeners. We get distracted. Our minds wander off. We go off in tangents, disappear into our own little worlds. We won't concentrate on something if it looks too samey for too long, and that is more true now than ever before, because we all have to sit in front of our computers all day. There is so much of every single speech that we listen to through our screens that is just the same. We're sitting in normally the same places, and we're watching it happen through the same mediums. So what we can do developing our skills as public speakers is understand how those distractions incur and how those interact with people's concentration. And as slightly demented as it sounds, we can manipulate that to our own advantage, right? We can get a sense for how and when people are distracted, and we can make sure that we guide their attention in such a direction that we're able to get our point across and we're able to convey to them what it is that we want to convey. For example, I could tell you right now that there are 689 million people living in extreme poverty. And it might be unfortunate, but me telling you that statistic probably didn't give you an immediate sense for how disastrous it is, how many people are living in such terrible conditions all over the world. If I wanted to build an emotional connection between you, my listeners, and that story and that problem of global poverty, I would be far better placed telling you a more rounded story, giving you more context, giving you maybe names, faces of individual people who are experiencing what I'm talking about, and telling you more about what it means to be one of those 689 million. It's easy to see how that would be a far more compelling way to move across that idea to you and make people really understand and really engaged in the problem that I'm trying to talk about. So for that reason, we're going to take you through what those essential tools are, and we're going to tell you what things you can use to make you the best public speaker you can be. Let's have a look in the public speaking toolbox.
Right, so onwards with the tools. Hi, everybody. Oh, can I check that I'm audible? Just, yeah, amazing, cool. So the first element of speeches that we're going to talk about is the beginning and the ending. Firstly, when it comes to beginnings, so what is the purpose of the beginning of your speech? Like, obviously to begin your speech, but what are you trying to do? What are you thinking about when you're constructing a beginning? If anybody cares to answer, I would love to open this up to the floor, question mark.
Get your listeners hooked into what you're talking about.
Absolutely. So it's grabbing people's attention. People's attention wanders off, just like Benedict anticipated. We're very easily distracted, especially when this is online. So it's more important than ever to make your beginning as attention grabbing as possible. In terms of like intermediary goals, it's also, so firstly, eliciting an emotion in your audience, like curiosity or sadness, etc. Usually this is because when you are made as a listener to feel an emotion, then you are seeking resolution for that emotion. So if you're feeling curious about, I don't know, a story or whatever, or a prop that is being presented on stage, then you want to know why the person has the prop or how it features into the story. So then you're much more likely to listen and pay attention as opposed to, like, I don't know, check a notification on your phone or whatever. Secondly, you should look for beginnings that tap into shared experiences. So it's not necessarily that you're making your audience feel something that they were not feeling before, but rather it is saying, hey, you know, here is an explanation to a thing that you also have felt in the past, right? So it's creating a shared like bond with the people that you're talking to. And in that way, that also like humanizes the speaker. So before there was no, like, you didn't have a reason to like listen to me particularly, but now I'm sharing, like, I don't know, we all have this friend, etc. So now you feel like I am more human because we share something, we have something in common, therefore you're much more likely to listen to me. Just on the same idea, like you're much more likely to pay attention to your friends than to a total stranger. So by creating that shared commonality, you're much more likely to get people's attention. Lastly, you can do those two things, but still create a beginning that isn't that good for the reason that it doesn't play into the themes of your speech, right? So your beginning needs to be tied to and prepare your audience to like the main point of your speech, right? So if I'm listening to your beginning and I don't understand or I don't know the basics of what you're talking about, then that's probably wasted time right there. Like we have in public speaking generally not enough time anyway to put our message across and our shared experiences across. So it's important for you to utilize as much as possible the time that you have. And by using your beginning to distill the point that you're going to make during your speech, then I think that's like maximizing the amount of content that you're able to get across. So that's all well and good. This is what you're trying to achieve, but how are you going to achieve it? Well, firstly, rhetorical questions. Rhetorical questions are really good because they're a form of interacting with your audience in ways in which and it's something that you can do even if you can't like directly interact with your audience. So for example, in this training, this isn't quite a public speech, right? It's more informative, right? So I can ask you questions and you can respond. So then that's a way to keep you engaged. But in usual, like in most forms of public speaking, in most formats, I can't ask you things. I can ask you to like raise your hand or whatever, but like usually it's still like me talking at you, right? And that can be a very like isolating experience for the audience because they're not really made to think. So, but if I am asking a rhetorical question, then basically the little voice in your head is like, oh yeah, like, yeah, what is the answer to that? What would I do in this situation? And then suddenly you're engaged in that as opposed to, and you're much more likely to ignore the notification that just popped up on your phone or whatever. Also, you're much more likely to tune into the talk because you want to know the answer, right? Like maybe your answer was, I don't know, and therefore you want to learn the answer. or you want to check if like the speaker gives the same answer as you to see if you're correct or whatever, right? Anyway, all of those iterations are ways in which your audience engages with you much more if you ask a rhetorical question. For example, there was this talk about the black market that started with, so if you wanted to buy a bag of heroin, how would you do that? Of heroin, of cocaine, sorry. Right, but so then how would you do that, right? And I think the answer for both of us, hopefully, is I don't know. But still, it's like something that gets your audience thinking. How would they do that? Do they know? If they do, then I don't know, are you going to confirm those expectations, etc.? The second method is through anecdotes, right? So stories, just like Benedict said before. So it's something that people can follow much better. It's much more likely to like tap into the ways in which our brains have evolved, right? Because our brains aren't really made to understand Excel spreadsheets. They're made to understand narratives. They're made to remember faces and made to remember names. So it's much more likely that you're going to get somebody's like cogs working or turning if you tell them something like a story. And then it's also likely that they're going to have similar stories, or they're going to relate to your story in some sort of way. So it's important to get them hooked in that sort of way. Also, lastly, so visuals or props, if you can have them. Sometimes you can't, so sometimes the format just doesn't allow you to have a presentation or whatever. But if it does, then please do use it, right? Like we could have done a training without these slides, but then the chances of you actually paying attention, or I don't know, not checking Facebook every once in a while would have skyrocketed significantly. So I think it's important to give people something to look at that is productive. Also, use props if you can, but also if they make sense for your talk. And this is what gets me to stuff that we advise against. The reason why it's not phrased as like never do this 100% is because public speaking comes in very many like shapes and sizes and formats and stuff, and I can't absolutely guarantee that like it's not like it's never appropriate to do these things, right? I can only tell you that, I don't know, I guess in personal experience, most of the time it's probably not a good idea to do these things. Firstly, introducing yourself. And I guess, I mean, it's a bit ironic because we also like were introduced here and we introduced ourselves, right? But it just goes to show, right, there are different types of like talks you could be holding. This isn't a public speech, it's a training. And in trainings, it's much more useful to introduce yourself than in other types of public speeches. But there's just generally, it's much more important to make sure that your audience cares about the thing that you're talking about, and then that they care about you, right? Like there is no reason to assume that just because you hold the degree at X university, then people are going to care about your research automatically. It's much more likely that people are going to care about your research if your research is interesting or if it affects them personally in some sort of way. Here, at least, it's like a curated audience, so I'm assuming most of you care about getting better at public speaking, but we still spend some time talking about why public speaking is important. So I guess we're not really failing our own advice here. Second, so just start rambling about your topic. It's very similar in reason, right? If you don't give people a reason to care first, then they're not going to pay attention. And the thing is, if you do it like, because we're talking about how to do a good beginning, right? You might like introduce yourself and then talk about why your subject is important, whatever. But if you've lost people's attention, right? If you lost the beginning is when you know that everybody's tuned in, right? That's when they have like the maximum amount of attention. That's when they haven't decided what they think about your talk yet, so they're willing to listen the most. So it's the most high stake time in your speech. If then afterwards you do the thing you should have done in the beginning, then some people will come back because I don't know, they just have like higher attention spans or whatever. But you risk a lot because you might lose a lot of people that have shorter attention spans, that have other things to think about, that just like staring at walls or whatever. So it's important to get the stuff that matters out of the gate, and the stuff that matters is, why should you listen to me? Why should you continue to listen to me? Why is what I am saying important or worthwhile? Also, similarly, don't be too loud or too flashy. The reason why I say this is because also a lot of people are aware that beginnings should be attention grabbing, and I think also the instinct sometimes is to go the other direction and, like, I don't know, start screaming or do something like really just, I don't know, do a lot of body language or whatever. That's not necessary or productive. Like, yes, you will wake people up, but not get authentic attention. You will just get like, oh, okay, all right, and then an immediate instinct to disengage from whatever you're talking about. I think people are like, don't treat your audience as if they're idiots, right? They also recognize when people are like attention seeking, right? They want your attention and they'll do anything to get it. It's important to have like a quiet type of confidence to know that even if you're not screaming or even if you're not doing this, then you're saying something worthwhile because you believe in your topic and you believe in your talk and you know that it is good enough to grab people's attention on its own. So that's important to keep in mind. Don't overdo it. We wouldn't want you to go into the other direction. Lastly, and maybe most importantly, using these tools and also the tools we'll talk about later in this presentation, just for the sake of using them is something that we definitely advise against. So as a rule of thumb, everything you use or everything you say should be motivated. That means that you should always have a reason behind it, right? I am using this prop, not because I like props or not because, I don't know, I like slides or because whatever. It's because it furthers my point in some sort of way. It is conducive to my audience understanding the core of my talk in XYZ way. If you can answer that, then it's probably a good use of your prop or of your tool or of whatever. Cool. So we're going to watch some TED Talks now as examples, right? Because I can like, I don't know, tell you in abstract about beginnings and endings like until forever, and I think you can find trainings like these online. But I don't think you will understand properly unless you like see these pieces of advice being implemented or not being implemented. So we're going to watch some TED Talks, and afterwards I'll ask a few things. And so have these questions in mind for all of the videos that we'll be watching. So what tools are being used in the beginning or later, you'll see in the ending, etc. Is this tool efficacious? Why or why not? Just because I'm showing you a TED Talk doesn't necessarily mean it's good or it's following the things that we're talking about. And lastly, so based on this, what do you think the title of the talk is? Some of them have titles edited in them, so and you might see them, but just maybe don't look at them or like ignore them, and just imagine you're seeing the talk without the title. So what would you think the title is, or what do you anticipate the talk to be about? Cool. This is the first one. Just checking. I am pretty sure that you are able to hear this, but I will just play it for a little bit to and then check if like the noise is audible. Can you hear that? Nope. All right. I'm going to stop sharing and start sharing again with sound rather. Yes. That should solve it.
The human voice. It's the instrument we all play. It's the most powerful sound in the world, probably. It's the only one that can start a war or say, I love you. And yet many people have the experience that when they speak, people don't listen to them. Why is that? How can we speak powerfully to make change in the world?
Cool. So that's a very short example, but I like it a lot because it is very concise. So what are some thoughts? What tools are being used here? and are they being used well?
I mean, he says something that like sort of everyone is supposed to like be able to relate to, that like the feeling of not being listened to, even though you're speaking.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. So he's using that relatability factor. So everybody can relate to trying to speak but not being properly heard, right? So then in that way, you're like, oh yeah, I think about that. And then you're anticipating that if, you know, a problem is being outlined, then hopefully this talk is going to provide some solution towards it, right? So then you're much more likely to lean in and be like, all right, what is this about? Absolutely. Any other tools?
He also tells us why we should care about this talk at all in the first line, saying that our boys can start wars, can say I love you, etc.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's very powerful framing to say like the human voice is the most important thing, and you're like, oh yeah, it totally is. Yeah, so I should possibly listen to this. Absolutely, absolutely. So then it sounds like what you guys are heading towards is that this is an efficacious use of all of the tools that we've talked about. So yeah. Also, there is at the end a rhetorical question as well. Is like, how can we use our voices to make change in the world? So yeah, and then we can from this anticipate that this is a talk about speaking and how to use our voices better. Yeah, I like this. It's very like time efficient. It is a very short talk, but it's a talk that doesn't like break anybody's expectations or anything, but it is good at using basic tools of public speaking in order to create feeling and to like stimulate ideas in people. The second example.
Good evening. Good evening. How are you? Are you good? Great. Welcome, welcome, welcome to this match. This match will take exactly 18 minutes. Okay? And you're all part of the same team. Mechelen. Okay? Hey guys, I would like to see fair play on the field, respect, and positivity. Is that okay for everyone? Cool. Good luck.
All right, so what do we think about this?
I mean, I think that it's kind of what you said, where it's a big, loud sort of command of your attention, but then it kind of takes a while to get into it afterwards. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. So there's definitely the whistle there, which like why, and it's unclear where this is going. So what would you think, like the title was there briefly, but like what do you think the talk is about?
I didn't see the title and I still have no idea what it's about. Something about unity because he said the same team, but unsure.
Yep, absolutely. So you don't like this could be about literally anything. Teamwork. Wait, sorry. I forgot what this is about. So let me just check what the title. Yeah. So how not to take things personally. This could be like how does this sport metaphor tie into it? Still unclear. And by the way, I didn't cut this uncharitably. Like this then goes into another anecdote or whatever. So this is the beginning. And at the end of this, we're still very confused about what the point is. So not great. Anything else? Any other thoughts?
Too many open-ended questions. Like the audience isn't sure, is it this a social setting to respond? Should we not respond?
Yeah, absolutely. It did have a pretty awkward feeling of like, are you expecting somebody to say something? Because they can't, right? Like it's a big audience. This isn't like raising your hand or whatever. So we can't really engage. Yeah, absolutely. So to avoid that, do like test your talk for like, or just apply some common sense questions of like, what am I expecting from this? Am I expecting an answer? Why am I doing this rhetorical question, etc.? So yeah, absolutely. Also about the prop, So we already talked about the whistle, but like the bowl.
Yeah,
I guess oh, sorry, you go ahead, Simon.
because of the ball, it felt like if it wasn't going to be a talk specifically about football, then it was just an obvious gimmick, and I would feel like, I was just entered into a really bad comedy night. It was just so off the point, especially hearing what it was actually supposed to be about. Yeah, and it just felt more like a performance, not like someone wanted me to listen to what they had to say. They just kind of wanted to entertain. And I don't understand why the football was there. And if I went to that talk, I would have thought about that for weeks. Like,
Absolutely, absolutely. So sometimes props can be distracting rather than reinforcing your point. And arguably, like the whistle was already there. So what, like we already get a sports vibe if that was the message that had to be sent across. So then the question is, why reinforce it with two props? And then that's distracting. All right. So that's a whole bunch of no-nos in terms of performance. I mean, I also just want to say, like, no shade towards this person. This TED Talk has like 2 million views on YouTube, which is like a lot. So it just goes to show that like even people that are like, I guess like popular and like very smart outside of this, right, can make mistakes in terms of how they utilize these things. So I think even if you think you're a good public speaker, it's always worth like questioning, why am I using this prop? Why am I saying this? Is this going to come across a bit cringy? Is this unnecessary, etc.? I think everybody can use with some editing, and particularly in the beginning when you need to grab your audience's attention. That's very good. Okay. Nope. And then our last example for the beginning is this.
So I have a Facebook friend whose life seems perfect. She lives in a gorgeous house, and she has a really rewarding career. And she and her family go on all these exciting adventures together on the weekends. And I swear that they must take a professional photographer along with them, because no matter where they go or what they do, the whole family just looks beautiful. And she's always posting about how blessed she is and how grateful she is for the life that she has. And I get the feeling she's not just saying those things for the sake of Facebook, but she truly means it. How many of you have a friend kind of like that? And how many of you kind of don't like that person sometimes? We all do this, right? It's hard not to do. But that way of thinking costs us something. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, is what our bad habits cost us.
Cool. What do we think about this beginning?
I thought it was fantastic because before she even got into the content, I just wanted to hear her talk more and more and more because I felt completely engaged with her, even though I kind of knew that she hadn't gotten to her point yet. I felt completely with her. So I thought it was incredible.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think like I really love her way of speaking. And I think it's very nice contrast if we compare to somebody like in the second example that we thought was a bit too loud and maybe like a bit too obviously trying to grab our attention. I think it's worth looking at an example that is a bit understated, particularly in terms of like loudness, tone, etc., and just seeing how that quiet confidence can help command the stage. I think that's very powerful. What else? What does she use, like in terms of techniques and stuff?
I mean, I think this is a really good example of humor, which is not really cringy humor, but it's kind of a deeper humor in that it's relatable. Do you know what I mean? It's, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. She's doing the thing. She's tapping into shared experiences, and it's not like, oh, are you guys sometimes thirsty? Me too. It's like it's more like specific, like a very, I don't know, I guess an experience that we all share, but we not very often talk about, right? For some reason, right? Nobody wants to necessarily own up to the fact that they hated their friend who's always happy, etc. So it is something that is unique, but it is still something that we can all relate to. Yeah, absolutely. And that draws you in and you're like, oh yeah, I mean, I would have put my hand up. And yeah, that is quite funny when she like turns it on you and it's like, yeah, but don't you hate her sometimes? Absolutely, absolutely. I think this is a great example of a beginning that even if it's not like massively time efficient, but it is very rewarding at the end. You're like, okay, that paid off, like even if it was slightly long. I think that was like a good contribution. All right, amazing. Cool. We're just gonna move on to the ending. There are examples for this one as well. So, but yeah, before that, just more theory stuff. So, what do you guys think the purpose of an ending is?
To put all of your speech in middle, because people might have just forgotten what you said in the beginning of the middle and then be like, oh, what did they say? And then the ending is like, this is what I said and this is what I want you to take away from this.
Absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, so it's all about leaving your audience with a positive last impression of your talk. So because of recency bias, it's much more likely that people are going to remember the last thing you said than anything you said in the middle, just like Ananya said. So it's important that you then like make sure that you synthesize your point in that last bit. So you make sure that your audience actually understands what your talk was about and understands what the core of it was. Maybe in the middle, you alluded to what your point was, but there was a lot of like filler, maybe a lot of anecdotes and stuff that you had to go through, maybe a lot of foundational work for your audience to understand the subject matter that you are going through, etc. So at the end, it's important to remind them what they should take away so that, I don't know, in the evening when they're having dinner or at night when they're just falling asleep, that's the thing that they think about. So with that in mind, so I guess the question is tips and tricks of how to create an ending. Firstly, always know what you will say. I think this is important to know, and I didn't say that at the beginning because most people start writing their speeches chronologically. So they're like, okay, beginning. And I think even if you've never written a public speaking speech, you can relate to this by the way you do your essays. As like you write an introduction and then, okay, middle something. And then you're like, actually, I don't like the beginning. So then you slightly reword it 17 times. And then you're like, okay, all right, what example should I use here, etc. And then your deadline arrives and then you realize, oh, wait, I haven't actually written the last paragraph or I haven't given it much thought. And now I'm like, I don't know, an hour away from the deadline. What do I do? So I think it's actually a better idea, just like in your essays, to write the beginning and the end and then try to do the middle. And then obviously if in the middle you realize you're writing a different speech than you thought you were, then do like come and correct it. But it is very important that you have something in the end, that you don't just like trail off. Then you're not like, you reach a point and then you're like, so yeah, that's me. Like, that's you. What are you trying to say? What were you trying to communicate? It's important that you have something written down. Secondly, call to action. This is optional, so it's very like dependent on the nature of your speech, etc. But given that we're like working off of the TED Talk format a lot in this training and just generally, I think most public speaking speeches are trying to appeal to people changing their behavior in a certain way, then I think it's advisable to like end your talk with like asking your audience to do some homework. So next time you think about this or next time you encounter this, make sure to blah, 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 right? And it's something that can make your audience feel like your talk is going to change their behavior in some way and that it has practical repercussions to their actions. So even if that's not obvious in their talk, so maybe your talk is, for example, about your lived experience and the type of like oppression that you experience on a day-to-day basis, it may seem unclear, like, okay, like that's a very beautiful, moving talk, but how does that impact me? So then a call to action about, for example, being less prejudiced in your day-to-day life is something that is very like efficacious to say, right, so I have a stake in this. Okay, I understand now. Also, there are things that you can do with your ending contextually in your talk, right? So for example, you can do the thing that like classical novels do all the time, which is like begin in the same way that you started. So you start with a sentence and then you end with the same sentence and you're like, oh, it's nice, it's circular. This is a safe way to do it, and it's always satisfying for people to see. People like symmetry, that's a way to do symmetry. A second thing you can do is ask a rhetorical question at the beginning, like we said before, and provide the answer at the end, so that then your speech sort of serves like a prolonged answer to that sort of question, where you go off and then you do some like background work and then foundational work about what the problem is or what the issues you're trying to solve. And then at the end, you're like, so actually the answer is this. And again, very satisfying as a classical method of doing your ending. Cool. The first example and just by the way, before I get into this, so again, the reason why I'm using TED Talks is not necessarily because this advice is only geared towards you if you want to do a TED Talk. It's just because it's like a large database of speeches. So this literally applies to as many formats as possible. But yeah, so let's watch the ending of that speech, then watch the beginning of.
This is where we are now, right? We speak not very well into people who simply aren't listening in an environment that's all about noise and bad acoustics. I have talked about that on this stage in different phases. What would the world be like if we were speaking powerfully to people who are listening consciously in environments which were actually fit for purpose? Or to make that a bit larger, what would the world be like if we were creating sound consciously and consuming sound consciously and designing all our environments consciously for sound? That would be a world that does sound beautiful, and one where understanding would be the norm. And that is an idea worth spreading. Thank you.
Cool. So what do we think about that? Especially because you've seen so the beginning and the end.
Yes, it's good because despite us not hearing the entire middle of it, we know what it was about. So it reminded us, even if we had heard it too, it would have done a good job of reminding us.
Absolutely, yeah. I really like this, as you point out, because like literally you can sort of understand what the middle was about, like not in very big detail, but like you kind of know what this talk was, right? So it's a very, very like classical and straightforward use of these techniques. Absolutely. What else?
It asked and answered a question that was probably asked at some point in the speech, or is like is a question that summarizes the speech and then he answers the question.
Yeah, absolutely. It also uses, it uses some rhetorical questions and also like answers them then in order to highlight the point of the talk, and then also to motivate a call to action, right? So it's like this is an idea worth spreading implies go spread this idea about the way in which we design the spaces in which we speak and the way in which we hear other people, etc. Absolutely. I think this is very efficacious, and it uses its time very well in terms of threading a message. But it's also like more classic, so I guess like less likely to get people excited. How about wait?
This is where we are now, right?
Nope. How about this one? So this is the beginning. I want you guys to see the beginning and then the end so that you can connect them.
My name is Canwin, and I play both the piano and the violin. I aspire to someday be a doctor, and my favorite subject is calculus. My mom and dad are tiger parents who won't let me go to sleepovers, but they make up for it by serving my favorite meal every single day: rice. And I'm a really bad driver. So my question for you now is, how long did it take you to figure out I was joking?
That's the beginning.
My name is Canwin.
And then this is the end.
My name is Canwin. My favorite color is purple, and I play the piano, but not so much the violin. I have two incredibly supportive, hardworking parents and one very awesome 10-year-old brother. I love calculus more than anything, despise eating rice, and I'm a horrendous driver. But most of all, I am proud of who I am. A little bit American, a little bit Chinese, and a whole lot of both. Thank you.
All right. So for context, if this wasn't clear, so this is about like pushing back against Asian stereotypes. So what do we think in terms of the ending, but also how it relates to the beginning?
The circular ending that's pretty much the same as the start is very satisfying to see.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's using that circularity of like the introduction, and then it's also like going through almost the same characteristics, but it is changing them to reflect like her actual characteristics. It's also satisfying the beginning particularly because it's like pushing back against expectations. We'll talk about that in a second, but basically like one expectation you would have is that of honesty. So usually when people go on a stage, you expect the stuff that they're talking about to be true. So that she does a whole introduction and then she's like, psych, all of that was a lie. So yeah, absolutely. But this is mostly a very good example of how to use that symmetrical beginning and ending for a very good stylistic apport. God damn it, I keep. Yes, okay. And now this is the last one. This is just the ending.
These are fantastic humans. They are smarter and kinder and more creative than we ever were. Yeah, some of them are broken, but they are also patched together in ways that allow the best light of humanity to shine through them. And if that light is muted, maybe it's because it is cloaked behind layers of adult manufactured issues. Let's draw back the curtain and see our children for who they truly are and who they have the potential to become. Let's embrace what we see and not flinch. Thank you.
What do we think this talk is about?
I'm guessing kind of negative stereotypes about kind of our youth in society and why that's ultimately wrong.
Absolutely. Yeah. So she's a teacher and she's sort of like sharing the lessons that she has like found through her students. And yeah, so what is her point?
It's a call for parents to be more supportive, nurturing, and not like telling, more like guiding them or something.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's like, yes, stop trying to helicopter parent your children. They're like way more brilliant than you realize, etc. Absolutely. And she distilled all of this. Like, obviously the talk goes into much more detail, but this, I particularly like this summation. It's very like efficient word-wise, I think, and it's also very beautiful. And the emotions that it elicits, even though it's like, I don't know, like 30 seconds of time. Yep. And I think, or it's something to remember. I think it's definitely something that after you're done, the feeling is left with you, or I don't know, at least for me personally. Oh,
These are fantastic.
Whenever I try to change the slide.
Fantastic humans. They're smart.
Apologies, I'm your grandma. The second section of this is, so how can you use style and rhetoric in order to get your point across? So the first element of this is how to use language, right? Firstly, in terms of tips and tricks, Try to use accessible terms as much as possible. I don't know about you, and obviously this varies with like educational system, but at least in my experience, my high school education was very much centered around the idea that I must use fancy language in order to come across as intelligent, and like only intelligent people use very long words, therefore use long words to express yourself and you'll sound smart. In reality, I don't think anybody really buys this, or especially like people that have tried to do a public speech themselves. It is usually harder to use simple language to like put forward very complicated ideas. And nobody, like everybody can look up in Merriam-Webster's like a very long word and use that. And like that doesn't show that you are knowledgeable of a field or that you know what you're talking about, right? If it's absolutely necessary for you to use like specialized language, then like make sure that you like that your audience understands what it means, or like use a metaphor, or like, I don't know, have fun with it. Acknowledge the fact that most people don't understand what the word means and make a joke out of it. Use every opportunity you have to like to create humor. And on that note, the second thing is like be creative with your use of language, especially if you have time to like write your speech beforehand, right? So the first thing is like leitmotifs, which is a word borrowed from, I mean, I think a lot of fields, but like predominantly music, right? And also like literature. So it's just phrases that you repeat that have a certain meaning, right? So if you embed a word with meaning and you repeat it all throughout your speech, then it's like it's a shorthand, right, for an idea, an emotion, etc. And it also creates that sort of symmetry, right? If you start every other paragraph of your speech with a certain word, then that creates like a nice flow to your speech, and it creates that type of symmetry that people enjoy and that they find satisfying. Also, do jokes. We've seen examples of jokes that work less well. But there are also loads of jokes that can work very well. And even if your joke sort of falls, you can still, if you're spontaneous or even a little bit spontaneous, right, you can make fun of yourself of like, haha, you know, thought that would work or something, or I'll try next time, or something of that sort. Also, like be theatrical, right? Experiment with variation, speed, pitch, tone, etc. We'll see a really nice example of this later on. Also, if you know different languages and this ties into your talk in some way, then definitely don't be afraid to use different languages, especially if you're like all right with, I don't know, translating them later on, or acknowledging that most of your audience doesn't have access to that. So then don't put the core of your speech in there. But anyway, I think it's important, especially like, I don't know, if you're talking about how traveling has shaped you, for example, using language to put forward that message and different words is very efficacious and should be something that you're considering. In terms of other types of language, not mouth language, but body language. Body language is very efficacious. And I know, I mean, if I were sitting in front of you and not at the desk, you couldn't be able to, I usually do this a lot. Yeah, body language is very useful because it helps like accentuate your point, not only like words wise and like gears in people's brain wise, but also like visually, which is very important. People are very visual in general when like they think of points. Also, it communicates concepts, so like small, big, if you want your audience to remember something, etc. So all of these are like common ways and almost natural ways in which people tend to move their hands or their bodies to communicate certain words. Also, body language is useful because it communicates how confident you are and how enthusiastic you are about something. It's very important to let your audience know that you want to be there, and even if you don't, even if you'd rather be doing something else, or even if you feel like your whole body is on fire because you're so anxious about the prospect of speaking in front of so many people. I think trying to look enthusiastic is a very good way in which to anchor yourself into a feeling that is not like cool confidence if you can't master that, but it's also not like 100% nerves, right? It's more energetic than co-confidence, and that like I think can channel a lot of anxiety if you're struggling with that. But yeah, also confidence as well. So like making eye contact with your audience is obviously very important, but it needs to be said, etc. The way that like stand up straight, all these things, I think. Not going to spend much time on them because they're a bit intuitive. But yeah, being aware of your body language is very important. Tips to improve on that is just practice speaking in front of a mirror, and not only with, I mean, it's important to practice every speech you're doing in front of a mirror, because you tend to do different body language things with different words or different phrases, etc. But also as a regular thing, if you get time to do it, just talk to yourself in the mirror. I know it's weird, and like if your flatmates come across it, then they'll be very suspicious, and it looks really weird. But when your flatmates are not at home, then try to get in as much practice as possible. Just talk to yourself about anything, and you'll find yourself realizing all of the things that you're doing with your body subconsciously and being much more in control of your body movements, if you find that that's something that that just happens to you and you don't think about it. Then in terms of expectations, so it's a tool you can use. I don't want to say that you necessarily must, because again, we have seen a good beginning and end that subverts no expectations, that it is just doing like what you would expect a TED Talk to do. So it's not necessary, but it is something that is at your disposal, if that is something that you feel benefits your talk in some sort of way. The way to do that is to sort of do an empathy exercise. So if I were listening to my own talk, what would I think this person would say? If I were in the audience in this particular format, what am I expecting somebody to do? This obviously varies in format, right? So like a TED Talk person is going to do slightly different things than somebody that's doing like a Toastmaster speech, which is the big public speaking people. So the formats are different. Some use visuals, some don't, etc. So you need to have a relative knowledge of what your format requires. But generally, that is something that is common across, right, most public speaking formats. So Kanwen's talk, for example, like we talked, there is an expectation of honesty there, and that is subverted when you just come across and then you're like, that wasn't true. Secondly, using props and visuals in order to subvert people's expectations. But remember, again, can't highlight this enough, the use must be motivated, right? So just because it's like, oh, my talk is about, it's about the environment, so I bought a tree, because it's the environment, doesn't, or it's not good enough reasoning to then give people that sort of prop. Because if you have a limited amount of attention and you use your public's attention on something that is irrelevant, and they notice that, then you're going to lose most of their attention. And we're going to go into examples of how to do this well and how to do this less well. So this is the first one. This is more about the body language, the language stuff.
December 23rd, 2013, my life changed. This was the day that I got to attend my very first Beyonce concert. And I've been a fan of Beyonce's work for quite some time, and it took me a while to attend the Beyonce concert because truly in the beginning of my life, my parents funded all of my experiences, and they just weren't willing to invest in a Beyonce experience. And then when I was at an age where I could invest in my own experience, I was a graduate student at Loyola University, Chicago, and my grad student budget also was unwilling to let me invest in a Beyonce experience. And I remember calling one of my friends, and I was quite sad about it. I shed just a few tears, just a few. And I was just really upset. And she said, you know, Stacey, I'm sure she's gonna do another concert again. And I said, you know what, you are right. I am going to start a Beyonce savings account today. And she was like, yeah, you should do that.
I was wrong, actually. This covers the subverting expectations too. So, but okay, let's go through the language and body language bits. So, did we like that? Did we not? Why?
Even though I'm not sure yet what the talk is about, she's just, the way she's moving is really engaging, and her tone is making me really want to listen to her.
Absolutely, absolutely. I really love the way that she speaks, and so the body movements are all very excited, and it makes sense for the talk, right? Because she is describing an event in which she was very excited. The same body language, like imagine if it was on a talk that was supposed to be very emotional, would feel very misplaced, right? But this is about like, or I guess like sad, right? Because this is an emotion. It's just the emotion is excitement. But yeah, so it absolutely fits with the tone of the talk, and then the way that she's talking, or the way she's able to move from her own voice, which is very excited, and then the voice of her friend, which is like, yeah, is like, it's very efficacious, both in terms of like communicating what these people are thinking, but also comedically, right? So that contrast is something that is funny. That's very true. How about subverting expectations? So I forgot that was in there.
Well, yeah, she kind of made us think it was this really kind of, I mean, it was a life-changing event in some ways, but as if it was like some kind of dramatic or tragic sort of event in her life, like, you know, a loss or something. And then it was Beyonce, so it kind of dispelled the tension. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. So this is knowledge of the TEDx format. As a lot of TEDx talks are very, very personal and very, very highly emotional. And it's more rare, I think, that people talk about like more trivial, down-to-earth experiences, like just going to a Beyonce concert, right? So then knowing that, she's like, all right, it's gonna be like one of those emotional ones. Psych, it's a Beyonce concert. Yeah, so that's like an emotional, like humorous payoff of having your expectations subverted. And I also think it's a good example, like this in general, of just good talks not necessarily having to be about experiences that are like very unique, or that like, because this comes from a personal experience of mine of being like, I don't have anything to do a public speech about, because I don't know, I don't think I've been through an experience that only like 1% of people have been through, and therefore I have nothing to talk about. But actually a lot of times it is like, if you have this toolkit in mind, then you can do a public speech about literally anything. And if it is like valuable and it is something core to you, then it really doesn't matter how many people have experienced it. If you have something that is relevant to say and something that will be relatable to other people, it's actually sometimes even preferable for you to do something that a lot of people have experienced, but that people don't talk about for several reasons, like taboos or just people being uncomfortable, etc. So yeah, this is a great talk. I can send you guys the link later. God damn it.
December 20.
Nope. Okay. The second example. You might know of this guy, kind of minor celebrity. When
I was a kid, the disaster we worried about most was a nuclear war. That's why we had a barrel like this down in our basement, filled with cans of food and water. When the nuclear attack came, we were supposed to go downstairs, hunker down, and eat out of that barrel. Today, the greatest risk of global catastrophe doesn't look like this. Instead, it looks like this. If anything kills over 10 million people in the next few decades, it's most likely to be a highly infectious virus rather than a war.
Yep, sorry, I cut that way too soon. He said a war. But yeah, so thoughts about this. Do we like this? Do we not?
clearly he's clairvoyant and he knows everything.
Oh yeah, this was done in 2015. I'm sure you got this in your recommended, because most people did at the beginning of the pandemic. But yeah, so this is a talk from 2015, and it's about the Ebola crisis, and it's the YouTube algorithm has a sense of humor, question mark, by showing people this. But yeah, I mean, in terms of techniques. So what did he do? Was it good?
I don't understand why there's a barrel on stage. Like, you could have just said, I had a barrel of food.
I think it starts off with some sense of confusion because exactly we didn't know what the barrel was. And then he links that into an emotional connection, like, oh my God, yeah, 50 years back, nuclear warfare, great. And then with the pictures behind him, he's able to change this huge mushroom cloud to a tiny little virus and talk about how that's actually more dangerous. I think it's engaging a lot more.
Absolutely, yeah. So I think there are some things that are good, and I definitely, or my initial instinct is to say the barrel is really weird. Like, there was also a picture of a barrel, so I don't know why is it necessary for it to be on stage? Presumably most people know what a barrel looks like. And then I actually fast forwarded through the talk. He doesn't use the barrel in any sort of way. It just stays there, in the back for the rest of the talk. Just I don't get it. Which is, again, it again goes to show that even the best of us sometimes fail with doing public speaking, because I'm sure he does loads of talks and he's a very intelligent human, but I don't think this works here particularly. But I think also Sharath is right that the contrast then after the weird barrel bit is very efficacious, and insofar as it does do some subverting your expectations, to assume that something this big, obviously a mushroom cloud obviously must be more disastrous, but actually something that is small could be very, very dangerous because of XYZ reasons that he will go into. Absolutely. So yeah, there are good bits, there are bad bits, particularly questionable use of props. So for did I do this right? I did, finally. So for a different use of props, and maybe you can tell me if you like this one better.
Well, this is a police officer's uniform, a Baltimore City police officer in particular, named Robert White. He gave me this uniform when he and I became the very best of friends. But, I first heard about Robert White when I was a teenager. And then I later met him. I met him just a month after he got out of prison. He was in prison serving a sentence for assault with intent to murder 2 black men with a shotgun, and another sentence conspiring to bomb a synagogue in Baltimore. Now, I am a professional musician. I tour all over this country and around the world playing music. So how do I end up with a policeman's uniform? He worked for the police department by day, but he also had another job, which required a different kind of uniform. He was the Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan for the state of Maryland. This is his robe. This is what he wore when he conspired to bomb the synagogue and when he made plans to kill 2 black men with a shotgun.
Right. So what do we think about that use of props?
I mean, I think it's almost like the fact that he's holding the clothes and he seems quite almost close to them feels like quite a contrast from the fact that this guy supposedly, considering his actions, hated him in a sense, like he would hate him. So to think that he entrusted him with these important things is kind of a shocking thing. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. I like actually hearing it now on a raised volume. I think you can hear there is an audible reaction in the crowd when he pulls out the uniform. You can hear a so like that is definitely something that is very, very shocking. So then it works very, very well to draw the audience in, right? Because you're like suddenly asking yourself all of these questions, like how, you know, like why, right? How did this happen, right? So you're significantly more likely to want to listen to whatever this person says next, right? Because you've been put into such a like a shocking scenario. Yeah, absolutely. Any other thoughts?
Okay, not necessarily prop related. So if anyone has something to say on prop, say it now, I guess.
No,
okay.
I mean, go ahead, yeah.
Not really prop related, but like, I kind of like the fact how he kind of gives the start of the story and the end of the story, and it makes you kind of curious what's going to come in between, because he kind of goes like, I had this friend who was a police officer, but also the member of the Ku Klux Klan. But then he also says, like, we are friends, and he gave me his item. So, like, I mean, I'm like, it kind of like, we can assume that like they're still friends. So you're kind of like, okay, clearly something's missing in between, like something happened there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a very good point. I think people are very afraid to spoil the end of stories, thinking that it ruins then the experience of finding out like the middle of it. But actually, if it's a good story, most of the time it is still worth listening to, even if you know the end, because again, the journey is worthwhile. So yeah, absolutely. I think that especially since, I mean, this is a very good story. I recommend you watch this talk. But yeah, if you do have something like that, then it's not necessarily bad to tell me the end if I'm still going to be very engaged in it at the end. But yeah, absolutely. This is, I think, a more efficacious use of props, and it is definitely more impactful because the props are there, but also because the story itself is so good. That also very often helps, I think.
Well, this is a police.
Nope. All right, and now handing it off to Benedict, because I think you've heard me speak for like a very long while.
Cool. So we're going to round off today by talking about what is probably the newest facet of the topic of public speaking. It's something that's very new to everyone, and that is how to do public speaking over Zoom and in the various other virtual methods which present themselves to us nowadays. Google Hangouts and Microsoft Teams also exist, but let's be real, it's probably going to be Zoom. It's been kind of a strange turnaround for the world of public speaking, because up until pretty much this year, it has just been accepted, like out of hand, that there is nothing as good as in the real, like in the same room, public speaking. That is why, like, right up until our entire international world shut down around us, people were still traveling thousands of miles every year just to go to conferences, which are essentially just glammed up people in a room talking to each other. All right, the technology existed for like pretty much a decade beforehand for us all to facilitate these kinds of activities virtually. But it's somewhat of a development, not just for us as people trying to improve our public speaking skills, but also as a society building our expectations around public speaking to adapt to this new world, right? It's kind of been accepted that, like, if you have enough money to invest in the kind of resources that, say, the TED organization that runs the TED Talks have, you can get somewhere by broadcasting a live speech, but that there isn't anything really that can exist purely virtually that will be as valuable and as engaging. But unfortunately, it's a reality now, or unfortunately, or unfortunately, however you want to say it. You will be delivering talks over Zoom if you join us for our public speaking competition next semester, and I do hope you do, and I encourage everyone to do that. It'll probably happen in some kind of virtual form. So let's have a look at what we can do to make the most of it. What are the things that we can look to improve how our speeches come across online? Firstly, more than it was ever the case in a sort of physical public speaking setting, the setup of your virtual talk is far more in your hands than it ever was. So it's far more important in terms of the choices that you make for those. The first thing, which kind of sounds obvious, but you definitely should remember to do and encourage yourself to do, even if it feels a little bit weird, is to do what I've called here all of your pre-flight checks, right? Check your microphone, check your camera. If it's possible to get somebody else who's who's in your same physical space to go into another room and check that you're coming through over the call or whatever else in loud and clear, and you're able to see them and hear them and do all those things. Do those checks, get them out of the way early. Even before you get to that stage, your laptop or whatever device you're using will probably have some kind of camera app, something that you can look what will come through your microphone and camera app. Look at that beforehand. This is kind of the same advice as the practice your speech in a mirror principle, right? Like practice your speech looking through your camera, maybe even do a little recording to see how you're coming across. Of course, once it goes over the internet, it won't come out in precisely the same quality, but it'll give you an idea of how you're coming across on camera and how that might be different to what you're experiencing hearing yourself in the real world. The next thing to think about is your lighting. And this is kind of an area where almost we're all becoming like amateur YouTubers, right? Like public speaking is taking on like a videography. It is important to think about your lighting, to think about how you're building the picture which people will see on the other end of the call. Because if they are listening to you, even if you've got a presentation up, you've got something else to show them, people are going to be looking at your face. It's a natural human thing to do, to look at the thing that's speaking to you, and so people are going to be watching. They are going to be experiencing that. Natural light is the absolute best way of lighting up your video, right? If you can sit next to a window and have the sun happily shine on your face, that is the way that people are going to best see you, are going to best experience what you have to say. Don't like try and recreate a TV studio in your home office, right? Like you can't set up a massive professional lighting rig and have people see you so beautifully with your own wherewithal. There's no substitute for the sun. After that, your best bet is some kind of ambient lighting, seeing everything else in the room. And as an absolute last resort, if you really still cannot be seen, you can set up a sort of desk lamp at some distance from you, not right in your face. The thing you want to avoid is getting the screen glare on your face, right? Like having your face, let's see, if I can try and light up my, you maybe can't quite see it there. If I can try and turn up the brightness on my laptop right here, you can see on my hands a kind of bluish tinge. Nobody looks good in that light. Don't do that. Try it as much as possible for the lighting of your room to match the lighting that is on your face. The next thing is to set up everything around you in the best way to get it across. Like I say, people are going to be looking at your face. People are going to be looking around you. Give yourself a background that you're happy with, and a background that gives you the look and feel of the presentation you want. Not every context is going to require you to sit in your office chair and have sort of all of your uni work equipment around you. Like right now, you're in a living room with a nice piece of art behind you, and I'm sitting on a lovely comfy sofa. And what this gives is a sort of feel like I'm chatting to you in a slightly more casual way, right? It's slightly less, it's not meant to be like we're here to work and we're here to like to be serious, listen to him and listen to complicated, important things. This should be a little bit more chatty, a little bit more relaxed. And if at all possible, just to make sure that everything goes off smoothly at that time, do get a friend who is tech savvy to sort out the other bits and bobs behind the scenes. Get somebody, if you're like live streaming somewhere, get somebody else to deal with the live stream. And if it goes down, have that person on hand to deal with it, rather than disrupting whatever you're trying to give, whatever kind of presentation that you're trying to get across. And yes, shout out to Kajetan, Dialectic's resident tech guru, who sorts out all of that behind the scenes for us. So once you've got your setup and you are delivering your speech to people, there's a number of other techniques on top of your other public speaking elements that you want to get into. The first thing is to be comfortable. So like I illustrated earlier, you now have the responsibility to make sure that a lot more of the setting around your speech is appropriate in a way that you might not have to if you were delivering a speech physically. That also gains you the right to set up far more of the world around you in a way that makes you feel most comfortable, that makes you feel most happy. You can sit on a cup of tea. You can not sip on a cup of tea. You can sit on a sofa like I am, and be sitting far more comfortably than you might necessarily be if you were wandering around in front of a massive room of people. Do not be afraid to make yourself as comfortable as possible. And I'm not saying be naked from the waist down, but if you are that confident that you are not going to accidentally stand up without turning your camera off, and that makes you happy, nobody will ever know the difference. So yeah, do absolutely everything that you want to make sure that you are as comfortable as you can be. The next thing then to think about is how you deliver your speech. And the tip here is to imagine as far as possible that you are delivering your speech to a real room of people, right? Like, you might feel the urge because your device is like so much closer to you than your audience would ever be in a real room. There might be the urge to to dampen your voice a bit and to sort of constrain the performance that you're giving a little bit more. Don't feel like you have to do that. Like right now, I am speaking at a volume that you could hear loud and clear anywhere within this massive room that I'm in at the moment, even though my microphone is within touching distance. You want to fill that room, not just because it will come more naturally in terms of any experience you have with public speaking before, but it will meet people's expectations. It will meet the kind of cadence that people are used to hearing, speeches with, and it will allow you to more seamlessly incorporate that experience, which you would be getting if we were having that in real life. Speak as if you were speaking to a room, because that will give you the fullest experience that you can have. The third tip is to be as engaged and engaging as possible. The most unfortunate aspect of public speaking online is that it is so much more difficult to keep people's attention. It is so much more difficult to engage people in what you're saying. And this probably means that you're going to start looking at far more aspects of back and forth than you might otherwise be compelled to do in a physical setting, right? Because you want people to have something that they can feel as though it matters that they're in the Zoom call, right? You feel as though it matters that they are here listening to what you have to say. It's worth here exploring all kinds of interactive mechanisms. There's services like Slido that you can use which are free for personal use in terms of what technologies you'll need to use that on a small scale, which will allow people to interact with polls, interact with question and answer type formats, and all those other things. And allowing people those avenues to interact with your talk in a way that they might not otherwise feel like they can do, because it is very awkward to be the person who's like putting their hand up in a Zoom call and like and taking over in that way. That adds a little extra barrier which you can break down by bringing in those other sorts of techniques. And the final piece of advice to make this all run off smoothly is similar to the last one. In the same way that you might want to get somebody to help out with your tech, have somebody help out with facilitating those question and answer sessions. Have somebody on standby to feed you through the questions which are most relevant and would be interesting for you to talk about and to address in your speech, rather than having to constantly go and check through chat feeds and those sorts of things. If you're really mean, this can be the same person who you ask to help with your tech setup, because you might not have that many friends. I'm just kidding, of course. But the ultimate, and then the final thing to do is to do exactly what Ananya did at the very start of this talk. Yes, thank you, Ananya. Which is absolutely feel free to ask people to turn their cameras on, because it is quite strange to be delivering a speech to an empty void, not be hearing the laughs when you tell those jokes, and not being able to look people in the eye in the same way that you would be able to physically. So do encourage people to turn their cameras on and look at you a bit closer, be able to see people smile as you say something funny or say something nice. Being able to see people really does help, and if anything, it helps people feel that their presence in the call is valued if you're encouraging people to turn on their cameras and be evidently there in that way. The last piece of advice which to leave you then on this is to remember that this is a very new aspect of public speaking. If you think about it, this is like what we told you in the entire first hour and a half of this session is everything we've learned about how to speak in public since people started speaking in public, right? Like for thousands of years, people have been refining what does it mean to present something to speech that is engaging and valuable. And this is an entirely new spin on all of that. This is an entirely new paradigm to look through. So now more than ever, it's important to go out and look for the techniques which we've talked about in public speaking and how they're being applied in this new world, and look for other things that people are doing, new things that people are doing with this paradigm and with this way of reaching people that you feel engaged by and feel that's something that you could incorporate into the way you do things. That's valuable, of course, not only in this context, but in all contexts of public speaking, because like we say, there's no one way to do public speaking, and the best thing you can do is make the most of the speeches which you're listening to and enjoying yourself. So yeah, that's where I want to leave you with that. Go out and watch the world around you and how you are engaged in public speeches yourself. That's going to be the last thing we talk about today, but stay tuned, because next semester we are coming back not only with the next part of this exciting workshop, but with the public speaking competition, before which we will teach you more of the ins and outs of how to write a speech in the best way possible. Julie, do you have anything else to tell us about semester 2?
Nope, that's pretty much it. All of the details about that will be on the Dialectic Facebook page. If you think we haven't covered something in this training, we know, we're aware. That's just coming in semester 2, so I guess you'll have to be engaged for that too. Oh no, how your expectations have been subverted. So yeah, look forward to that. Thank you so much for your attention, and thanks for your engagement. All of you are very smart toppers, and all of your answers have been brilliant. So thanks for that, loads.
Before we leave, just an advert for the future events that we're going to have from the Dialectic Society. So on Wednesday, that's the 11th of November, is a social and the first year rep elections. So if any of you are first years and want to run for board, this is a great opportunity to do so. It's a nice way of it's also, the social is also a great way of getting to know everyone in Dialectic a bit better. Then on the 16th, which is a Monday, 16th of November, we have a talk with the Women Wage Peace, which is a collaboration event with the Palestine-Israel Dialogue Society. That is going to be a really interesting panel event that you should all come to. That would be it'll be a lot of fun. And then on Friday, the 27th of November, is the Murder Mystery and Dinner Night with the Dialectic Society, which sounds super cool. So yeah, looking forward to seeing all of you in these events. And thank you all for coming, and hope you enjoyed this lovely, lovely workshop. Thank you, Julie and Benedict, for that. That was awesome. Thank you all for coming. Have a great night.